Well, hello and welcome to the Lunchtime live stream. For myself, I'm here with Donovan Gregory, our student minister at Catalyst Christian Church. My name is John Kelly. I'm the minister of engagement, and today we are ready to be back doing the live stream again.
Excited.
Yeah, man. Last week was my fault. Got like this nasty sinus thing, and I couldn't talk on Wednesday. So it was pretty bad.
It'd be kind of important for you to be able to talk for this, I guess.
Yeah, that's kind of the point. There's a lot of talking that happens here. So
so
just a real quick few announcements. This Saturday we have a men's breakfast and study going on. That's going to be February 19th this week at 8 a.m. And Tim Wheaton is going to be leading us in a Bible study of Gideon, which I'm really excited about that. It's free, but donations are accepted. That'll help to offset the cost for the breakfast. But if you can't pay anything, don't make that keep you from coming. Please come and eat our food. We'd love to have any of the guys here for that. Also, if you're interested in joining a community group, please contact Benson Gregory at bensondgregory@gmail.com, and he will get you hooked into a community group, which we're actually going to be talking about those a little bit later on today. So that'll be fun. Mono's Coffee. We're starting to see some new people trickle in from time to time now. On Tuesdays, feel free to come out. It's every Tuesday at 7 a.m. We're just out there having a great time hanging out, fellowshipping as brothers and sisters in Christ, and would love to have you guys out there. So if you've got nothing going on before work, come hang out with us for about 45 minutes and then head off to work and have a great cup of coffee in the process. Donovan.
Yes, sir.
Today we are talking about a faithful church.
We are. That's exactly what we're talking about.
We're in a brand new series, and it's the church that puts God first. We just got done with the first, which is basically kind of inwardly focused, sort of, the kind of idea of as individuals, how do we put God first? And this week we started the series talking about the church that puts God first. So what does it look like when it's not about us individually, but the church as a whole? And we talked about a faithful church, and the main thing was in essentials, unity. In non-essentials, liberty, and all things love. What did you, when you heard the main thing? I mean, you're just now getting trained for ministry and all that. What did you think when you heard that?
Honestly, I was confused reading it when Dave first sent it to me, and then I realized what he is going with. But the whole thing, we have to be united. We have to be on understanding that the essentials, what we find essential, what they are, and we all have to agree on them to be Christian, or to be a quote unquote Christian church. With the non-essentials, you can have liberty, you can agree with them, you can disagree with them, but kind of they aren't that important, so they shouldn't be what defines us. And then all things love. I mean, we're told to love our neighbor as ourselves. We should have outwardly expressive of Jesus-like love.
Yeah. Well, and the origins of this whole thing in essentials unity and non-essentials liberty, all things love, comes from something called the Restoration Movement. Our church is actually part of that Restoration Movement. It was started at the Cane Ridge Revival back in 1801, August 6th through the 12th. There were 20,000 people who descended upon Bourbon County, Kentucky. Think about that. There were between 10 and 20,000 people. And if you've ever been to Cane Ridge, it's so tiny,
it's
right?
Very small.
You said your mom teaches at Cane Ridge Elementary, right?
Yep.
Yeah, it's so small, and there's nothing there.
No.
But there were between 10 and 20,000 people, and that's where what we know as the Independent Christian Church, the Disciples of Christ, and the Non-Instrumental Church of Christ, those all came from that 1 week. And that's where this whole saying of in essentials unity and non-essentials liberty and all things love comes from. And so Dave was talking about that this week because as a church, we are part of the Restoration Movement, but also it's just a phenomenal way to look at the church, to break it down into such a simple thought is great. And so let's talk a little bit about the essentials where we need to have unity. What are some things, Donovan, that you would consider essentials? And if you're on right now, let us know what you think essentials in the church should be. And no, Daryl Jordan, if you were on, it does not mean 80s metal. That is not an essential for the church. So
why not? I think I agree with Daryl. Why not?
Well, you would. What are some essentials, Donovan?
Well, the two that come to my mind are the only way to heaven is through Jesus Christ, and the Bible is the Word of God. Those are the first two that kind of popped to my head. I'm sure if I had more time, if I gave it more thought, I could think of others.
I mean, obviously, Jesus was born of a virgin.
Yep.
Died, and 3 days later rose again.
Yep.
Like you said, salvation is only through Christ.
Mm-hmm.
Those are things that are essentials. Those are the things that, if you are wanting to be considered a Christian church, not necessarily like denominationally Christian church, but like a church that follows after the teachings of Christ, those are the things that you should inherently believe. They should be common knowledge for the church, and we should be able to know those without having to think twice.
Church common sense. Common
sense in the church, which common sense in humankind half the time doesn't work. But hopefully we can bring common sense to the church, which is good. So in non-essentials, liberty, and this is kind of what I want to talk about the most today, because this is the area that gets gray for a lot of people, where we see things that are non-essential as essentials. And one of the first things that gets talked about is always worship styles. And I wanted to just kind of show us a clip from the sermon Sunday, kind of something that Dave talked about on Sunday. And we'll just kind of talk about that a little bit as it pertains to this whole idea of worship styles.
These non-essentials, this is where most of the fights start, over this stuff that's non-essential. Okay, now it usually starts with someone taking a non-essential thing, I'll get to them in a second, and putting them in the essential category. Okay, it usually starts like that, and that's where all the fights start. Now
you notice he doesn't say this is where arguments start. He says it's where fights start. I mean, you hear stories of churches that have split up because of carpet color. You've heard churches splitting up because of these little silly arguments on things that are not essential things, but they've become holy somewhere along the way. So I can't wait for the rest of this. This is great.
When I was in college and feeling called into the ministry, it was in the middle of what was known as the worship wars. Anybody remember the worship wars of the 1990s?
Yep.
Anybody old? Like these kids are like in the 1990s. That is so old, man. That is like, man, it might as well be the 1930s.
Now, I just want to say, like, he didn't have to go there. Like, I'm old. I'm the same age as Dave. We graduated the same year of high school. We're not old yet. I mean, we're getting there. We're getting there, but we're not old yet. We're not old yet. Anyways,
there were sharp arguments between traditional and what? Contemporary. Exactly. You alumni, you veterans of those wars. Southland pastor Mike Breaux, upon taking over after Wayne Smith. And this was in the Herald Leader, back when people read the Herald Leader. Okay? He showed up to church without a tie on. And he preached, not from a pulpit, you all, but from a music stand.
Now, Donovan, you're never going to have to experience this. Okay? You're just never going to have to experience this. But I worked in a church. I've worked in two churches, actually, where I had to wear a tie every single Sunday. Every single Sunday. Facebook user, the late 1900s. Late 1900s, interesting.
Interesting.
But I had to work at churches where I had to wear a tie every single week. And I remember coming out of college and just hating that with everything in me. I don't like wearing ties to this day. You can ask my wife. It's not something I enjoy. I will if I have to, but I prefer to never wear a tie again if I could. But I had to do that. And if you didn't, it was amazing the amount of people that would get upset that some minister on staff would not wear a tie. I mean, it's ridiculous.
That's just baffles me. But
yeah.
I don't know. It just is. Yeah. Not growing up in a church that doesn't require that, and I'm like, I just don't see the point in caring so much about something like that.
Yeah, it's amazing like how worked up people would get over that stuff. And I guess we really stopped on a great spot in the video because Dave's face is phenomenal right there.
That's beautiful.
That was not intentional, Dave. If you're watching, I apologize.
And this made headlines in Lexington. It's like a nuclear bomb went off, you all. Then, to make it even worse, then guitars and a drum set appeared.
Oh, yeah.
Come on.
Man. Yeah. And all of a sudden, Hillsong's Shout to the Lord was released. And that was akin, okay, the Gen Xers, my generation, you guys will love this. The Hillsong's Shout to the Lord was the musical equivalent of Nirvana's Smell Like Teen Spirit. Okay? My senior in high school, it was all Whitesnake, Def Leppard, Van Halen, Bullet Boys, that kind of stuff. And then all of a sudden, Smells Like Teen Spirit dropped, and the hair bands were gone, and it was all Pearl Jam. That's not clapworthy.
Okay, now I'm the same age as Dave. That was 100% clapworthy. Like, music had gotten stale. Like, really, really stale. Every band sounded like the band before. It got to a point where if you turned on the radio, there would be some power ballad by some new metal band that sounded just like a band that was on the song before the commercial break. You know, it was like, it was miserable. Like, music just hadn't changed in so long. And when it finally did, there were more people than maybe a lot of people want to admit that were so happy. Like, when Nirvana hit and Pearl Jam and Soundgarden and all these bands came out, a lot of people got really excited. Somebody actually said definitely clapworthy. I think it was. Not only that, but worship. If we look at it in the terms of worship music, we were singing the same songs from 1830. You know, like, seriously, like, the songs that we were singing were these songs that we've been singing for 200 years, and we couldn't understand why the world didn't think that the church was, like, relevant to this day, you know? And then you have the Gaithers came out with their music, and it was like basically glorified Southern gospel. We'll just call them New Age hymns. And they were okay in the 1970s, but by the time the 90s rolled around, those songs were old too. And there was a need for a revolution. And I personally, for one, was very thankful for it.
Still in mourning. I'm still in mourning that my beloved hair bands are gone.
Take a moment and pray for Dave if you get a chance. He's still in mourning. I mean, look at him right now. He's praying right now. So...
Okay, but the same thing happened when Shout the Lord hit. All of a sudden, it was like a tidal wave hit the church. And the arguments over pipe organs versus guitars, hymns and choruses, ties or t-shirts raged on in churches. Stop to think about that. We weren't arguing over the Bible or Jesus or making disciples. It was between what people believed. People believed that non-essentials were essential.
I love that segment of the sermon. I was poking fun a little bit, but in all seriousness, man, it was so true. I mean, how many people get caught up in these things that don't matter? You know? Let's talk worship styles for a second.
Yeah.
Why is it that worship styles are so divisive?
I think a big thing is people don't like change. The whole, like, you can't teach an old dog new tricks kind of thing. I just don't think people liked change, and it wasn't what they were used to when they came in on a Sunday morning. And then maybe even some people thought modern music was the devil's music, and making Christian music that way is dangerous, and it might lead to something.
Yeah. Ringo Wood's on here. I remember those days. Ringo, I remember them very well. Very well. I also think that, like, I was in a traveling singing group in college, and we would go to churches and we would set up our staging. We had our own staging. We'd set up our own sound system and everything. And we did this every place we went, just gave us consistency. We always knew our stuff would sound the way it needed to and everything. And we went to this one church, and there was a chair on the stage, and we needed to move it so that we could put our staging up. And when we went to move the chair, this old man stops us, says, "Do not touch that chair. That is my Lord's chair." And we're like, "What?" He goes, "My Lord sits there." And we were like, "You mean Jesus?" He's like, "Yes, Okay, so we set up in front of the chair. But this guy somehow believed that Jesus specifically sat in that chair during their worship service. And I asked around a little bit about it and came to find out that chair just sat empty. And somewhere along the way, somebody said, I imagine that Jesus sits here during the service, just kind of as like probably communion meditation or something like that. And just made the statement that, when I see this chair sitting here, God tells us that where the two or more are gathered, I'm there also. So I just imagine that Jesus is sitting right here when we're having worship. And that went from being a nice idea and thought to becoming Jesus literally sits in their worship service in that chair every Sunday. And if you move it, the Lord will not be in their worship service. I mean, is that crazy?
I think so.
That's a lot of crazy.
So. Yeah.
But we do that with stuff. I mean, we do that with stuff all the time. Like you look at churches and the way they do things, you can get so caught up in this is how we do it that we start to believe that we do it this way because it's God's way.
Yeah.
Not because, we did that because that was just an easy way to do that.
Yeah.
It's amazing how many things in the church that we do aren't done because of biblical reasons, but they're done because of habit.
Yeah,
it was
this is how
because
it's been
it was a
done
good way
for.
to do something. What's that?
This is how it's been done for however many years, so we're going to keep doing it.
Yeah, and I don't even think it's the mindset that they think they're going to keep doing it. Just kind of happens.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another one that's big, we talked about a little bit in Dave's sermon, but the personal appearance thing, man. We do a Bible study or a book study as a staff, and right now we're doing "Don't Give the Devil a Seat at Your Table" by Louis Giglio, is the book that we're studying right now. And if you're listening right now or you're watching, that is a fantastic book, and I would suggest that everybody in the church read that book. If you're not a book reader, this could make you a book reader. It's so easy to read, and it's so applicable. But we were talking, and I think it was Dave was telling the story of this woman who one day a young man walked into church, and she asked him to remove his hat, and he didn't. And she was really offended by it. And she couldn't believe that he would come in and be disrespectful by wearing a hat in church. And later on in life, she realized that back in that day, this might have been the guy's first time ever in a church building. And instead of welcoming him and telling him how glad she was that he was there and that he was there for worship, instead, she looked at him and told him to take his hat off. And that was it. And then for her, she couldn't even worship that day because she was so focused on a stupid hat that she couldn't focus on Christ.
Yep.
And it's amazing how many of us get caught up in those things. In 1 Samuel 16:7, it says, the Lord does not look at the things man looks at. A man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. And in Matthew 23:28, in the same way, on the outside, you appear to people as righteous, but on the inside, you are full of hypocrisy and wickedness. I don't know about you, Donovan, and you could tell me how you feel about this, but it seems like the slickest looking people sometimes can be the dirtiest people.
I would agree. So sometimes it's not
every occasion, but it just seems like you don't see too many like slimy people who dress gross.
Yeah, you don't. Yeah. Slimy people don't dress slimy.
Yeah, isn't that interesting?
Yeah, they try and put on a facade that they're better than what they actually are.
Yeah, I always find that really, really interesting. So appearance, I mean, you and I are from different eras, right? I'm Gen X, you're Gen Z. So we've got the millennials in between us, and we let them and the boomers fight all the time.
Yeah,
but we tend to get along really well, the Gen Z and the Gen X, which is kind of nice. We're the generation letters. How important is appearance to the Gen Z when it comes to church?
Honestly, I don't think it's that important when it comes to the church. I feel like a lot of Gen Zs try and look good for other people rather than maybe even on Sunday mornings. The goal is to look good to get noticed by someone else, not to look good because it's church kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, that makes sense. That totally makes sense. I mean, I don't think it's wrong for people to dress up for church if that's the way that they worship.
Yeah.
I think that's incredible. Like if that's a way that you honor God is by dressing really nice and wearing good, really nice clothes and coming in your best, I think that's awesome. Do that every week. But if you're someone who comes in and you're like, I literally come as I am before the Lord, all my faults, all my flaws, and I just lay them at his feet, and here I am, that's worship too. And I just think it's really funny how many people get bent out of shape.
Yeah.
Over appearance,
Yeah.
Here's another one. This wasn't mentioned on Sunday, but I'm going to mention it because it's one that can be divisive in the church, and that's how the end times will turn out. People don't realize, but there are many different views on how Christ will return and what's going to happen when he returns. And if we get too caught up in that, I mean, let's in the grand scheme of things,
yeah,
you follow Christ, you live a life according to his plan, and what happens?
You die and go to heaven.
Yeah. Does that make that stuff not interesting? No, it's very interesting. But for me personally, I don't care if the 1,000-year tribulation, it was right now, or it happens after we get called up, or it happens while we're all still here. That stuff doesn't matter to me because all I know is in the end, I get to see Jesus. I get to see God. And for me, that's the big thing. And I think there are a lot of teachings like this. One that some people get really divisive about is literal 7 days of creation. That can be one that really people get all bent out of shape about. Like I had one guy tell me, he said, well, if God didn't create the world in 7 days, then how could he be the most amazing God in the world? And I went, when did you create a world?
Yeah.
Better by talking? Like it says that God literally said, let there be light, and there was light. I mean, I can do that if I say Alexa first, but
that's the closest we'll get to creation. Yeah.
That's the closest thing I got to being able to create a sun, a moon, and stars. Right.
Yeah.
But people get so bent out of shape over that one. And it's on both sides. There are some people who think if you believe in a 7 literal days of creation, you're a moron. And there are others that say if you don't believe it, you don't really have faith in Jesus, which is just weird. Like it's like of all the things to get bent out of shape about, that's what we're going to get bent out of shape about. How about this one? Extra events or groups. How can those become essentials for people?
I feel like if they prioritize them, honestly, more than like a Sunday gathering, like a worship gathering, if they think that because I go to this church, I belong, or I deserve to go to events with them, or I belong in a certain group, like our men's Bible study on Saturday. Like we don't have, like a church doesn't have to do that, but it's good and it gives community to people, but it's not an essential.
Yeah. And I would say, like, I know people that think that churches that don't have Sunday schools are just evil, and there are other churches that are like churches that have Sunday schools are definitely like old school and don't realize that what's going on with today. And it's just amazing how these little things, like the children's ministry doesn't do enough events, or the youth ministry doesn't do enough lock-ins, or, it's like, why are these things so important to everybody? But that's what happens is everybody just gets caught up in these things and they become more important. What are some other non-essentials? If you're listening right now or watching, what are some other non-essentials? What are things that you've noticed in the church that you just feel are off base? I can tell you one my dad had.
Okay.
I could tell you one he had, like the first time he came to Catalyst, and it was an argument we had.
Okay.
My dad did not like the fact that we didn't pass communion. That when we started Catalyst, you walked up to a table and you took communion. He felt that was just wrong. Wow. I don't, to this day, we when we got done, he realized it was silly to be upset about that. But it was definitely something that he was a little bit bent out of shape over. And it was kind of funny that all the things, that's the one he would be upset by, you know?
Yeah.
Someone says they miss that. They miss doing communion like that. I'm assuming that's what you're saying, Facebook user.
Facebook user. Anonymous.
Anonymous Facebook user. Yeah, that was something my dad got bent out of shape over. It was like he literally let that bother him. I've had people here at Catalyst that there have been certain things they've said that have bothered them, you know?
Mm-hmm.
How? It's April Price. She goes, I don't know why I'm blank-faced.
That's funny.
Yeah, we do have chairs and not pews now. That's true.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's just really interesting. My camera just went out, didn't it?
Yes, it did.
Let me see if I can come back in. Wow, can you hear me?
I can hear you perfectly fine.
Well, look at that. I don't know why I'm out.
It's the Diamond show now.
Yeah, it looks like my camera turned off.
Huh, that's interesting.
That's
technical difficulties.
That's really strange. We'll try this again. Okay. See if I show up. I don't know. We'll see what happens. I can make faces at you this whole time and you won't even know. That's kind of the fun part about this.
Yep.
Let me play with something here. So we'll go with the FaceTime camera for just a second until we can get this figured out what's going on. Let's try this and see if are we coming back or not. Okay. Well, here we go, folks. We are going with the FaceTime camera now for today. So, all right, Donovan, what are some other things that people find very interesting?
I was going to bring up the pews and chairs, and then Ringo just made a comment. I can see that when he grew up, like communion was only a couple times a year, rather not every Sunday.
Right. Right.
I know there's churches that do that. Communion's every once in a while, and that's a big thing for them. Carpet color, like as much as we joke with that,
yeah,
there are people who will get bent out of shape over carpet color, especially if you decide to change it.
Well, it's funny you say that because when we did the carpet here at the church, I kind of picked it out and then I had a couple women look at it because I've learned years ago, women just do better with color than men do typically. But I also made sure that the colors I picked out were similar to UK colors because I knew where we are.
Yeah,
there wouldn't be a lot of unhappy people by that. The altar, no altar. That's something that's different for people. Now she's not talking about the altar where we bring up animals and we cut them up and throw them on the fire kind of thing.
Why not?
But she's talking just kind of the table up at the front where a lot of people come at the end of a worship service or a time at the end where everybody comes forward.
I think another one is baptisms, like how they're done. We have a inflatable hot tub. Some people might be angry that we have an inflatable hot tub and not a like baptism old school.
I do think it's better than the horse trough we had.
That's true.
Like we're slowly upgrading here, man.
Slowly.
Like we're taking our time and we're upgrading, a little bit at a time. So, okay. So here's a question for you. And this is, I'm leaving this open for everybody because this is something I want to discuss here as we kind of go to the second half of this discussion today, but community, is it a non-essential or is it an essential part of the church? This is a completely different thing than what we were talking about before. I'm angry about it because I had the horse trough and it was freezing.
See, that's an acceptable reason.
Yeah. No, it isn't.
I'm just kidding.
It's not essential, April. You'll be all right. But is community a non-essential or is it an essential? I think this is a good question to ask because we've talked about a lot of other things as being non-essential, but is community involved in that? First off, what are your thoughts on that?
I would say it's essential. It's essential in the aspect that we should meet together in person at least once a week and break bread and all the, all the churchy stuff, but
all the churchy stuff.
But also from like a mental capacity, like we talked about it beforehand, humans aren't meant to live in solidarity for their entire life. God did not create us that way. We can go insane. We can, have depression, anxiety, whatever it is, just by being alone for too long. And I think God designed us to have community, and he's given us a way to have not only community, but godly community as well.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that. In scripture, Acts chapter 2 says they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship, to the breaking of bread and to prayer. And you skip down to verse 46. It says, every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts. And the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. Mm-hmm. It seems like, at least in the early church, that was a big deal, that meeting together was vitally important to them. And I guess the question I would ask is, can you be a Christian and live your life without the fellowship of the believers? Is it possible?
I would say no, because of, there's a couple reasons I can think of, but like a big one for me is just thinking about disciple making. Like, we can't make disciples if we don't meet with people. Mm-hmm. And that's a big part of being a Christian, is bringing more people to the faith and having more people's salvation saved.
Well, and there's so many parts of Christianity that you can't do alone. Mm-hmm. Like you said, you can't disciple yourself. Like, you can't serve together if you're not together. Mm-hmm. In Hebrews 10:24 and 25, it says, let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds, mm-hmm. not giving up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another all the more as you see the day approaching. Community is such a huge thing in the church. A lot of what we're called to do, it demands community. It demands the presence of others. I love this. Iron sharpens iron. 100%. 100%. I haven't said it yet today.
I think that's your first one.
I had to bring in my 100%, and that goes for April today. But you have to, I'm never going to say anything's impossible, because Christ is bigger than me, mm-hmm. and the Holy Spirit's greater than I. And but I have a tough time looking in the Word of God and seeing how it's possible to be a Christian and not be in community.
Yeah.
It doesn't exist in the Bible. There's nobody that did it. Jesus himself, he walked around with 12 dudes all the time. He had a lifetime community group. Like, you talk about living life together.
Yeah.
Jesus and the disciples, they went everywhere together. And it was only in moments where Jesus would move off to be alone. But especially since COVID, we have turned into a society that spends most of our time alone, and then we take special moments to be in community, mm-hmm. which seems to be the opposite of Jesus' life. And if we're called Christians, and Christian means little Christ, then something's wrong. We're doing something wrong.
Yeah.
And we got to figure out what that is, because it doesn't make any sense why we think that community is something we do extra. It seems like in the Bible anyways, community is what you do all the time.
Yeah.
So
the book's kind of important. So
a little bit.
I would try and follow it as close as possible. But
yeah. That was one thing we were talking about. I think you and I have talked about this before. It was something that Rob Harlemer was always really good at when he was here. Mm-hmm. I don't think he's on right now, because he probably would have given some snarky comment at this point if he was. But if Rob was really good, it was always been really good about community. Like, it's something like that he longs for, he loves, mm-hmm. He's intentional about. And as a result, when he went to play in a church, there were people that wanted to go with him because they were in community together. Mm-hmm. And that's what it's all about. That's really what we're supposed to do. That's why you want to have unity in essentials. And here's another thing. Can you have unity in essentials if there's no unity, there's nobody to be in unity with?
No.
Yeah. And, in the non-essentials, liberty. And then we got this last part, and we'll just kind of touch on this real quick here at the end, but in all things, love. And Jesus himself said, a new command I give you, love one another. As I have loved you, so you must love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. It's kind of a big deal, understanding how to love each other. And it means even if we disagree on the non-essentials, we still love each other.
Yep. It doesn't turn into a fight.
Yeah. Even if something gets a little out of hand, we still need to love each other. I love this, Laura Baxter. I can't imagine living without community. 100,000%. That's not 100%, Donovan. That's 100,000%. I love that. I'm like Laura on that one. I don't know that I could exist without community. Community has done so much for my family, for myself over the years. And I think when people withdraw from community, there's a few things that happen. One of the things is you immediately start thinking the negative of everybody. And it's unintentional, but it's what happens. You start thinking, well, now everybody's talking about us because we're not around. If you call up and say, yeah, we've been praying for you guys. We miss you. The first thought isn't, oh, that's awesome. They're praying for us. The first thought is, oh, they're talking about us because we're not there.
Yep.
And you get this weird thing where you start to just imagine everybody's saying negative things about you when they're not, but you think they are. When you withdraw from community, you're also not getting love from your brothers and sisters because you've pulled away from that. So usually when people pull away from community, and you see this a lot in rehab, like when people are going through rehab and they relapse, they hide. And the funny thing is, that's the last thing they need to do.
Yep.
They need to be in community with people because they need to experience in all things love, and when you realize that the people that say they love you actually love you, that's huge. So people withdraw, they start to think negative about the people that love them, and they start to lack the ability to be loved. And I think also they just they get used to that, and it becomes a new normal. And I think that was a bad thing about COVID. It turned lack of community into the norm and something that everybody became okay with. And I'm so glad that that's starting to change. I heard in Scott County, they just made, or they're getting ready to make masks up to the kids. If they want to wear it, they can wear it. If they don't want to, they don't have to. That's awesome, because one of the things that they said has really been damaging kids is not being able to see each other's faces and smiling. And it's damaged the development of really small toddlers and infants because they don't know how to react to facial expressions because all they've seen are faces covered up with something. And so it's good to see that coming back. And I think when you pull away from community, that becomes your normal. And that's not good. Not good, Donovan.
It's not good.
It's not good. It's not good. Any questions online before we start to wrap things up here? It's this series so far this year. And I say series because it's the whole year is about God deserves the best. That's the whole idea of this whole year. And the first series I thought was phenomenal. I thought Dave did an awesome job with that. I'm already ready to just really jump into the series we're doing right now, the church that puts God first. And I'm excited to see moving forward just what Dave's got in store for these series. How's everything looking for you with the youth group, man?
It's great. We've actually had Elevate come for the month of February. Drew and Rob used to flip-flop back when they were both youth ministers and do a relationship series in each other's youth ministry. So they kind of came back and did that relationship series together as cool. Elevate. So it's starting to come not to an end because I'd say we're probably about halfway through, but it's fun. It's fun so far.
Cool. That's really cool. Well, just a couple real quick reminders for everybody. This Saturday is the men's breakfast at February 19th, 8 a.m. Tim Wheaton is going to be providing a Bible study on the life of Gideon. and we're going to learn a little bit about him. It's a free breakfast. Donations will be accepted, but don't let that keep you from coming. Come eat our food. We want you guys there. Also, if you want to be going to a community group, talk to Benson Gregory at bensondgregory@gmail.com. Also, this isn't on the list, but March 2nd is Ash Wednesday, and we will be having an Ash Wednesday worship service at 7 p.m. That's going to be a lot of fun. Hope you all can make it. And for myself and Donovan Gregory, Esquire, you guys have a great week, and we'll see you next Wednesday.